This is your Wednesday Daily Delivery. I am Michael Rand. Theme of today's show is defense, defense, defense. Gophers defensive end Boye Mafe will join me here in a little bit to talk about the big game coming up Saturday against Wisconsin at Huntington Bank Stadium. Good conversation with him. Chris Hine, who covers the Timberwolves for the Star Tribune, will join me as well, setting up Wednesday night's game against the Miami Heat and old friend Jimmy Butler, and talking about the surprisingly good Timberwolves defense this season. But first, what did I miss? We got to talk about two college basketball stories here, both involving Minnesotans at least. Number one, Chet Holmgren playing for Gonzaga on Tuesday night. They absolutely dominated UCLA, and a big part of that was Chet Holmgren and the way he affects a game on both ends of the court. He was kind of the star of Twitter on Tuesday night. Obviously, the Minnehaha Academy product could be the number one pick in the draft next season following Jalen Suggs to Gonzaga. Had a block on one end of the court. He's a 7-footer. You know, he's rail thin at this point still, but still that frame could add a little bit of pounds as the years go on. But right now, the way he plays, he's kind of like got a guard's mentality in a 7-footer's body. Blocked a shot, brought the ball all the way up the court, and made an unbelievable move to finish with a dunk. Just the way he impacted that game, an 83-63 win over UCLA, was just a real show. Number one against number two. I mean, winning that game by 20 points, having Chet Holmgren have the impact that he had. Holmgren finished with 15 points, 4 blocked shots in the game. So kind of, the college game, I feel like, has always maybe had a more defensive element to it, but it's kind of fun to watch defense these days because a lot of sports have turned more towards the offensive side, especially as you think about football, college football, the NFL, and the NBA, and it's starting to turn back a little bit more, and it is fun to watch a team that knows how to play defense. And as a segue to that, Gophers men's basketball. Haven't talked enough about them lately. 4-0 start to the season, and a lot of that keyed by defense. Ben Johnson's defensive mentality, Dave Thorson, his assistant coach, his mentality in helping them become just a real aggressive team on the ball. Marcus Fuller wrote about that in Wednesday's Star Tribune and in StarTribune.com. Gophers first in the Big Ten in three-point percentage defense, 23.9%, and first in defensive rebounding, getting 33 a game. Second in steals at a little over 8 per game. Found an interesting nugget in that story as well. They have a term called kills, where if you get 3 defensive stops in a row, they term it a kill. That's a Dave Thorson thing from back at De La Salle, where they played suffocating defense. Now, I do wonder a little bit if that, the defense will come back to the pack a little bit. 3-point percentage defense tends to be a little bit of a volatile stat, and as teams make more threes on them, and as they get against bigger opponents who can exploit them in the paint, they might come back to earth a little bit, but they do have the right mentality. They are aggressive on defense, and it is showing up this season in their 4-0 start to the year. Gophers looking to make it 5-0 tonight. Pretty much everybody plays tonight. They play Jacksonville tonight. The Wolves, of course, play the Heat and Jimmy Butler tonight. That one's at Target Center. The Wild plays in New Jersey. Nobody played Tuesday night. It was like I was kind of looking, actually had some time to watch some sports on TV. Nothing was on really on Tuesday night, but everything on Wednesday night, so you'll want to check that out and see if that defensive trend, at least for the Gophers and for the Wolves, which I'll get into with Chris Hine here in a little bit, will continue. Happy to be joined right now by Boye Mafe, senior defensive end, although like he reminded us a little while ago, could come back next year if he wants to still. Boye, before we think about that, though, we got to think about Saturday's game against Wisconsin, the opportunity in front of you. You've been through a bunch of these already. What does this opportunity mean to you?
I mean, it means everything. Being from Minnesota, playing in your hometown state, especially being a home game, with the lights and having the crowd that we're going to have this weekend, Saturday, it means the world to be able to go outside in front of the stands, in front of our fans from our hometown, our home state, and represent our state as a whole.
I think the cliche is, people always say it goes fast. And I mean, if this does wind up being your final home game, I mean, against Wisconsin, against, with a lot possibly on the line, does it feel like it's gone fast, or has kind of the strangeness of last season, does everything kind of blur together? How do you think about the big picture of everything that's happened here?
I mean, it always goes fast. Once you get into a season, once you get into the whole routine and everything after fall camp, the weeks start getting into the routine, and it just starts going. It's week by week by week by week. Next thing you know, you look up and it's like, oh wow, there's only 2 more games, 1 more game. How many ever games there's left? And I feel like every season does end up going faster than normal, and you don't realize it till the end. And now being in one of our last regular season games, I mean, it's here and we're ready for it. I think we're just going to go out there and prepare, as we always do every week, and making sure that our coaches put us in our best position for every week, every game.
You've seen Wisconsin enough times. I'm sure you grew up seeing some of the trophy games. Just they don't have a lot of surprises to them. They want to, kind of wear you down, pound you down, things like that. How do you prepare for a team like that, where you kind of know what's coming, but it's still pretty tough to stop sometimes?
I mean, the best thing is just making sure that we stay in our details. The biggest thing that we have to do this week really is making sure that we're doing our job to the best of our ability, but making sure that even though they keep doing the same things and similar things, just making sure that our details, no matter throughout the game, that they stay to par. And we keep doing our job throughout every play, and no matter what situation arises to us, we just respond from every situation.
When you were getting recruited here, 4 or 5 years ago, however long it was at this point, maybe 6 even at this point when the recruiting starts, like as you thought about what your experience might be like, have you, how is the reality matched up with the thought of playing for your hometown team?
I mean, when it comes to football, this means the world to me to be able to represent my home state, having my friends and family close enough where I can talk to them, and hearing people talk about how nice it is for me to be able to play for my hometown state means the world to hear those type of things. On top of that, being able to represent my hometown state, I think it means the world to me. And the experiences I've had in college, I mean, I think they've surpassed my expectations, and it's been a whirlwind, honestly, to go through everything that, throughout my career. And now that I'm be able to say that I've played here and done everything I wanted to play for Minnesota, I mean, it means the world to me and my family and all my friends around.
I heard you in the group setting, and I think Tanner Morgan said the same thing. You guys are very focused on Saturday, not really worried about what happens in the Iowa-Nebraska game on Friday, even though I'm sure at some point you'll know what happens. You'll know what's at stake in Saturday's game. How does PJ Fleck keep you guys so focused on just the kind of the one-game championship mentality?
I mean, the biggest thing I've realized is that, throughout the years of being here, when you do focus on the external, you look outside of what you need to focus on, it brings a lot of stress and a lot of pressure onto yourself that you can't control. So the biggest thing we talk about is the controllables and the uncontrollables. And the things that you can't control, you don't really focus on those, because regardless of you focusing, worrying, and thinking about those all the time, you can't change anything about it. But the fact is, the things you can control, the things you can worry about, like our game on Saturday, those are the things that you can control and take precautions and go through your process of preparing for those type of games. Those are things that you focus on. But the things you can't control, like what happens on Friday, those things you can't really waste your time or necessarily focus and put all your energy into those type of things.
But those are the sorts of things we love to write and talk about in the media, man. You're killing us.
I hear you. I definitely hear you. And it's something that I think that helps us out as a team to make sure we're on the right track. Because I feel as if, you have your players distracted and focusing on other things, that defeats the purpose, and that steals away from your end goal as a team and the things that you want to focus on.
One more thing for you, Boye. I'm really appreciating your time here. If you guys are going to win Saturday, give me 2 or 3 keys to how that's going to be accomplished.
I think we just got to play team ball. The biggest thing is that we got to come into this game ready to play team ball and ready to play with each other, play as a unit. There's no individual heroes. There's no one that has to do anything crazy. No one has to play out of their mind. The biggest thing is that we all have to do our job and do it to our best of ability. And if we do that and we stay together as a unit, offense, defense, special teams, and everyone play as cohesively, I mean, the rest gives us a better chance for this Saturday.
Boye, I appreciate it. Take care and good luck Saturday, all right?
Thank you. Appreciate you too.
Take a playcation to Mystic Lake for 24/7 gaming, fun restaurants and bars, and luxurious hotel rooms. And join Club M to bask in the rewards. Follow the lights to Mystic Lake, where every day is playday.
Enjoyed catching up with Boye Mafe. Of course, huge game Saturday against Wisconsin. I'll have Tanner Morgan, Gophers quarterback, on Thursday's show to help set up that game as well. Happy to welcome Chris Hine back on Daily Delivery, covers the Wolves for the Star Tribune. Last time I talked to you, Chris, it was probably a less happy occasion. I think we were probably talking about what's wrong with the Wolves. When are they going to get this kind of sorted out? Are they going to go on a West Coast trip and it's going to be doom and gloom? And to be honest, the trip wasn't great. They played okay in a couple of those games, but ever since they got back, it's been awfully good. They had the loss to the Suns, but that was a close game. Could have gone either way. And then 4 wins in a row heading into Wednesday night's home game against Jimmy Butler and the Heat. What do we make of this stretch of play, Chris?
Well, I think this is what they should have been doing at the beginning of the season, which is beating the teams that are, potentially finishing below them in the Western Conference. The Memphis win was a great win. But you look at the other 3 teams that they beat: New Orleans, Sacramento, San Antonio. If we're looking at this from the perspective of what will it take to get in the play-in, where 10 teams from the Western Conference now qualify for the playoffs, if you want to call it the play-in, the playoffs. Those are the teams that you have to beat, those 3 teams, because you got to finish ahead of them, Oklahoma City and Houston. You finish ahead of that group of 5 teams and you're at least the 10th seed. So from that perspective, I think they showed that, at least they know now that they are better than these teams that are at the bottom of the Western Conference. It took them a while to maybe reach this level, but these last 3 wins have been very convincing.
They have, and they do sit in 10th place right now in the West. And, like you said, a few years ago, that doesn't get you a whole lot, but now it gets you into that conversation where you're in that play-in and have a chance at least to get into that final 8 and get into the big series at the, in the playoffs. They've been doing it, and like you said, they've been some convincing wins, and they've been doing it with some consistency now in the starting lineup. And I wanted to reference a blog post you had about how their current starting 5, which is, Karl Anthony Towns, D'Angelo Russell, Anthony Edwards, of course, and then Jared Vanderbilt and Patrick Beverley, has been awfully good. In fact, best in the NBA, not the largest sample size yet because we're still pretty early in the season, but the highest net rating of any 5-person combo in the league, if I believe that's what you wrote. And they've had some consistency now. All those guys have started each of the last 7 games, correct?
Yes, that's right. That stat comes from NBA.com, and it's of 5-man groups that have played at least 25 minutes together this season. I think they've played somewhere in I want to say the 80s together, that grouping. So yeah, this lineup has been working. They seem to have kind of a set thing going on with their rotations in terms of when guys are coming out and subbing back in. And it's been working. Like last night, I think defensively, you really saw what Beverly and Vanderbilt can bring to the table on that end of the floor. They don't win that game last night, or that game at least isn't as much of a blowout as it was without defense, all the turnovers that they helped force, and the second chance points. So those hustle stats, which Vanderbilt is very good at and Beverly is very good at, they can help win on the margins, so to speak. And I think you saw that in these last couple of games here where, when the Timberwolves rebound well and they play halfway decent defense, they're in any game and they'll beat teams like New Orleans and like the Spurs and Sacramento when they play like that, or at least when they give that consistent kind of effort. Coming into the season, that was the biggest thing was, how is this team going to be good defensively? And I think, through the first stretch of the season here, I think we have at least enough evidence to say that while they might not be a top 10 defense like they are currently rated in terms of defensive efficiency, it feels like they could be middle of the pack, which is kind of what their goal was coming into the season. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think we have seen enough of that's been the most consistent part of their game this year, that when they've won, it probably has been more the defense than the offense. And that is definitely surprising. Number 7 in defensive rating in the league right now, best in the league over the last 5 games. Again, I think that's, some of that was coming against opponents that have a little bit of a harder time scoring. So we'll see that come up a little bit once they face some better offensive teams. But I think it's true. I think Patrick Beverley's influence and addition cannot be stated enough. I think you're seeing, kind of almost what they, and again, this is a slippery slope, and we're going to see Jimmy Butler Wednesday night, but kind of the impact that Tom Thibodeau wanted Jimmy Butler to have on the defensive end. Maybe we're seeing a little bit of that from Patrick Beverley right now, just a good communicator, someone who sets a tone with a certain number of hustle plays and always being in the right place, communicating well, those sorts of things. I think Jared Vanderbilt, his versatility on defense, where you can, he switches on a lot of different guys. He's not out of place guarding out on the perimeter. He's a willing rebounder, does a lot of that dirty work. And you combine, him and Beverley on the court at the same time. And then you just got a strategy where they seem to just be kind of scrambling, chasing people out off the line, and just trying to make every first shot a difficult one. And I think the downside of that has probably been they've given up a lot of rebounds, that their defensive rebounding percentage has been down at the worst of the league for a lot of the season. But the trade-off is I think they contest shots better than I've seen any Wolves team contest shots, especially from the perimeter, for a very long time. And I think that's going to win them some games this year.
I think you're right. I was just watching some of the effort, on some of the possessions last night, and I was saying to myself, basically, like, this seems different from a year ago and 2 years ago when, it seems like teams could get open threes against the Wolves at will. They have to work for it now. And, we'll see how their 3-point defense balances out over the course of the season. There's always, some variance in those numbers. Right now, those numbers are really good in terms of what opponents are shooting from 3-point land against them. But I do think that they're making it harder for teams than past Wolves teams have done. You could just see the effort and guys flying around. And like you said, that does leave the rebounding, leaves something to be desired for that. But, last night against a team and a big man in Valanciunas who ate them up in their second meeting in Minnesota, they ended up out rebounding New Orleans. That was because New Orleans was missing a lot of shots, but New Orleans had 60 rebounds in that second meeting when they got a win, and they didn't come close to that last night. So, I think the defense has shown some signs of the rebounding has shown some signs of improvement. And especially when you have Vanderbilt cleaning up the offensive glass, you might at least get some chances, second chances of your own at the very least.
Yeah, and it feels like the offense is starting to come around, even though they didn't make a lot of shots on, in that game, in that win over the Pelicans on Monday. They did, I felt like the shots they were getting were largely good. They were just missing them, and they still scored 110, and that's enough when your defense has been playing as well as they have. I think they've held 5 straight opponents under 100 points, which I'd be hard pressed to tell you the last time that happened for a Wolves team. Maybe there was a span in there with Covington or something that I'm forgetting, but that does not seem like a very Wolves-like stat. And, I think a lot of it is that core unit. I'm curious from your perspective. I know you touched on this already, but I wanted to circle back on it. Do you think it's more cohesiveness and having a chance to kind of have this set starting 5, or do you think these 5 players in particular play well together and their kind of skills mesh like that?
I don't know. We'll see how this lineup goes forward. It's working well right now, but things can change fairly quickly in the NBA, and matchups can foreshadow things. I do think when you look at the skill set, you've got 3 scorers on the floor in D'Lo, Towns, and Edwards. You're going to have that with whatever starting lineup you have, obviously. But when it comes to the other 2 pieces that you surround them with, Beverley, obviously very good defender, very good offensive rebounder, very good rebounding guard in general, can knock down the 3. So, he's not a liability on offense. Vanderbilt, in terms of like the half court offense, there's not really much for him to do. in that sense, besides set some screens and look for maybe open passes near the rim, and then of course offensive rebounding. So, but when you have 4 players who the other team has to pay attention to, he at least, you can kind of hide him on offense, so to speak, because the opponent has to pay attention to the other players on the floor. With Jaden McDaniels earlier in the season, we were seeing McDaniels just get in foul trouble. And it just he wasn't staying on the floor with any kind of regularity in the starting lineup. So, Vanderbilt comes and takes his spot, even though McDaniels is a better offensive player than Vanderbilt from that perspective. But I just think, when Edwards and Towns and Russell or Beverly are shooting threes, there's Vanderbilt racing to the offensive glass, and it's been a winning formula on offense. And it was last night because, like you said, they didn't shoot well, but they ended up scoring 110 points. And that was because I think they had 26 second chance points, if I'm not mistaken. So that's, 10-ish field goals or so that were generated off of offensive rebounds.
Yeah, and a lot of points off turnovers too. So defense creating offense in that game. I mean, they've really yet to see Malik Beasley get it going from deep. He's had a couple games where he's got it going. I think Jaden McDaniels has had a slow start, although he's had a little bit better go of it lately. So it's not like they've done this with everybody clicking on all cylinders. That said, it does feel like, kind of as a philosophical shift, it does feel like they're going through Cat a little bit more now. I know Anthony Edwards had that monster first quarter the other day that kind of spurred them on to that big win the other day. But by and large, it felt like early in the year there was a kind of a transition happening to be more of an Anthony Edwards team, and I feel like they've maybe kind of pulled back on that a little bit and said, well, wait a minute, this guy is going to be really good, and he already is a dangerous player, but the best offensive player we have right now is Karl Anthony Towns, and we're doing a disservice to ourselves if we're not playing through him more.
Yeah, and I think the big thing is not necessarily even picking one or the other. It's just trying to find a way for these guys to just play off each other, and I think early in the season, and Chris Finch has talked about this of late, I think Edwards and Towns and Russell were, I think, individually maybe putting it on themselves to try and jumpstart the offense and just jumpstart the season for this team. And now I think they've taken some of the pressure off of themselves. They're playing a little more freer, I think, offensively. I think you saw Cat last night. Hey, if teams aren't going to double team Cat in the post, I think he reminded people last night just how dangerous he can be when you don't give him that attention. And if teams do give him that attention, we've seen him struggle with it at times this year. But I think they're starting to figure it out a little bit more, just how to play with each other. I think you've seen that over the last week or so. It'll be interesting to see where this goes. And the question with this team, just in general, is how consistent can this be? How consistent can this effort be? How consistent will some of these younger players be on a nightly basis, like Edwards, like a McDaniels, a Vanderbilt? And that's the biggest question when you have a young roster, just how consistent it is going to be. Things are going well right now, but they're about to enter, I think over the next month or so, possibly the toughest month on their schedule. And we'll see what kind of stuff they're made of over the next month or so.
Yeah, I like that as a transition point to the kind of the final thought. I was peeking at their schedule as well. Obviously, the Heat and Jimmy Butler at Target Center on Wednesday night. They got Charlotte, which is an interesting game. You got LaMelo Ball playing really well there right now, and you got the Anthony Edwards LaMelo Ball kind of storyline there. And I believe it's Philadelphia after that, and that's always an interesting matchup with Cat and Joel Embiid. Philadelphia playing pretty well so far this season, even without the much discussed Ben Simmons. So some games that'll bring out a little bit of emotion in some of their best players, presumably. And yeah, how they handle that will be interesting. The Heat game is, it's one of the best teams they've faced this year. I mean, they really haven't played
a great team, I think, outside of Golden State. I think the Bucks, obviously defending champs, winning that game on the road. The Lakers, those are name teams, but they're not going great this year. The Heat probably playing, outside of Golden State, playing about as well as anybody they've played this season. So a real opportunity there to show, growth in a lot of different areas, I would imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it'll be a fun atmosphere. One thing that I wrote about for Wednesday's paper is this is the second 4-game win streak that they've had in the last 2 seasons. But before these 2 4-game win streaks, the last one you'd have to go back to just after they traded Jimmy to Philadelphia, and in that stretch where I think they went like 9-3 or something like that after they traded Jimmy. There was a 4-game win streak in there. That was the last time that they had a 4-game win streak. The last time they had a 5-game win streak was, I think, 3 separate times in Jimmy's full season. So there's a little bit of symmetry going on here. If they can beat the Heat, that'll be their first 5-game win streak since Jimmy's year here, and he's the guy that can stop them from getting to 5 straight. And of course, you've got the added incentive of the matchup of him and Carl, and they exchanged some words that were caught on microphone last year in Miami. We'll see if any of that continues tomorrow night. Always a fun storyline to follow for social media purposes. So I think it's going to be a fun atmosphere. It's a great, like you said, a great test, and we'll see we'll see a little bit of what they're made of tomorrow night.
We will. We'll see if the Heat become the latest frustrated opponent too. I was wondering. I was going to bring that up, and then I saw you wrote about it too. I loved the Tristan Thompson stuff the other day, where he was mad that the Kings lost to the Wolves and a bunch of other teams, and some other opponents have been frustrated about losing to the Wolves. Maybe Jimmy Butler will be the latest one of those.
I know it seems like the worst thing that can happen to any team right now is that they lose to the Timberwolves, because it's the Sacramento fires their coach a few days later. The San Antonio Spurs have a players only meeting. Anthony Davis criticizes the Lakers for not being a championship team. It causes a lot of self-reflection when teams lose to the Timberwolves lately. I wonder why that is. Well, they were 4-9 before this 4-game streak, and ironically, that was their record when they traded Jimmy Butler a few years ago and went on that little mini run with Robert Covington. So we'll see if that is sustainable this year or not. But I think the one thing to kind of circle back to the main point at the beginning was I think the one thing we've seen so far is that the defense is a lot better than it was last year, and is certainly a lot better than we thought it would be. And to what degree that is, will kind of tell the story of, just how good this team can be this year. Absolutely. And I come back to this point all the time. Can they do it on a consistent night in, night out basis? It's been looking good so far against some of the teams that they should beat. And that's a good sign if you're a Wolves fan. That's something that wasn't happening earlier this year, wasn't happening last year or 2 years ago. They were a part of the basement. Now they seem to be at least elevating themselves from the basement. I think we could say that over the last week.
Good stuff, Chris Hine. We'll do this again soon. All right.
All right. Sounds good, Mike. Thank you.
Now, Chris and I talked about the Timberwolves' excellent defense so far this season and what has played a role in it. We talked about 3-point defense. I don't think we gave you the exact stat, though. Like the Wolves at 29.7% right now, ranked number 1 in the NBA in opponent 3-point percentage. So that's that again, just like the Gophers men's basketball team, they have been very good defending the perimeter this season. We'll see how much that number stays as the year goes on, how much of that is their defense versus how much that is other teams missing shots. But as for right now, both of those teams leading, Wolves leading the NBA, Gophers leading the Big Ten in opponent 3-point percentage, which is a very good thing to be on top of in this day and age. Let's finish with the cooler and keep it on defense. Did you see Real Salt Lake in Major League Soccer won a playoff game without taking a single shot in regulation? Yes. Regulation in 30 minutes of extra time, they were outshot 21-0 by Seattle. But game gets to penalty kicks 0-0, and Real Salt Lake wins on the 6th penalty kick. So you can win a game without taking a shot in Major League Soccer, but a defensive stand by Real Salt Lake to make it all the way to that moment as the underdog, and they now go to the semifinals of the West against Sporting KC. That will do it for today. Like I said, Tanner Morgan coming up on Thursday's show, as well as Mark Craig with his NFL picks, and looking ahead to that Vikings 49ers game, which should be very, very interesting. Have a bonus show on Friday. I know I said we wouldn't have one earlier in the week. Well, I talked to Phil Miller about Twins payroll stuff, and it was just too interesting. Couldn't fit it into another show this week, so we are going to use it on Friday. So there will be a Friday show as well. Thanks for joining me here today. I'm Michael Rand. We'll see you again on Thanksgiving.